Okay. Okay. Testing the wedge, baby. Looks like you don't need me. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. It's gonna be a really relaxed stream today. Maybe the end of the day stream. I just got back from traveling. My family disappeared, which is kind of concerning. I'm trying to talk to them. I can't figure out where they went. I'm going to call them again in a little bit. Don't worry. My wife took the car. She's obviously with my son somewhere, but you guys are like, what? Yeah, so I'm feeling pretty good about this price action actually. I know it seems bad, but I like that we made a dip and then we made a ceiling at 457 for now, because if we break, it's sort of it may be necessary to have a kind of a sideways spring action here regardless. And if we break back to the upside, I would like for us to have gently traded this area so we don't have to come back later potentially. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm not positive. But I mean, at this point, who really cares? If it breaks out, it breaks out. So I'm watching those levels, and I'm happy that we moved up to where we did and then came back down, and we may be about to cross. I'm a little nervous about it, but generally speaking, it looks okay. I see a lot more heavy volume right here. No real strong heavy volume in the top. So I still think this looks pretty good. So we may end up with a little bit of a end of the day move here. I don't know. Looks like we already kind of jumped it. Maybe we come back and we can move back to the upside if we find that advancement. It could be positive. I guess the only thing we don't want is to kind of walk across all these for 3 days straight or 4 days straight, which I suppose is a possibility with no real strong reaction. I'm a little nervous about that. Not like nervous in like a, oh no kind of way, just like more of a curiosity. Like, I wouldn't really want that to happen. I could see how that could happen. I'm still of the opinion, and I know I had a kind of a crappy stream yesterday. I apologize if you guys listened in. I was actually kind of a jerk. I don't know what I was doing. I guess I was in a mood. It's not the nicest I've ever been. I felt a little sassy. You know, to me, the market is semi-predictable because of things like TA. And at the same time, there's plenty of moments where I'm like, yeah, but, you know, it can be a bit frustrating to do TA at the same time when it's not really giving you the strongest of answers. So you're not getting like maybe the best answer that you want to get. And if you're not getting an answer that you want to get, it's hard to just be like, okay, emotions off, you know. I'm getting better at it. I'm working on it. I promise. I really am. And so if somebody pokes me while I'm in the middle of those moods, I can be a little bit annoying. So I felt like yesterday a couple people were poking at me, and I was like, it's such a simple thing, you know. And I just kind of took it the wrong way and ran with it. So I'll try to do better next time. Try to do better next time. Here's what I'm looking for on AMC, just kind of a break above this outer creek here. We're really just sitting right on it, so I'm not sure what to expect just yet. We broke this guy, found some support, and came all the way back down to the bottom. The reason I'm a little bit curious about sideways is because sometimes in these ranges, if they don't have a strong early reaction that gets you back up, like an immediate response, sometimes these end up building out like basically the range. And it makes me really nervous because I don't want to be in a situation where we come coming to next week and we're just sitting here at like 450, you know, or we drop down again and it's like, oh, we finally went down or something, and you know, everybody's looking for the gap fill, of course, but it's like this could be a really long range, and then you could end up having like a late week spring or some price action going into Monday, and it's just like, imagine how frustrating that would be as a trader to just have to watch this go sideways all week because they've developed this distance from the outermost channel or creek, if you will. I need to color this one differently. That would be really annoying. Timing wise, I don't put a whole lot in this idea that it has to be up perfectly by Tuesday or Wednesday or something, but I did have some pretty strong indication that we should be heading back up before Tuesday. And I guess the biggest concern I have right now is that we get stopped pretty low here and we end up with a real low bounce all week. So this type of a deal would actually make some sense, coming up to 5 and then coming back down by the end of the week. And it's annoying because it's like, well, does that kill the whole move? I mean, it could. We haven't jumped this yet, so part of me is not really overly concerned. Like, I'd like to jump it sooner than later so that we can come back and test it early. I don't want to dawdle sideways forever. But if you were going to look at this as like a gap fill moment, and I think we closed at 435, so I'm going to go to 435, and you were to say, like, look, Booksy, we're going to come down in gap fill, we're going to hit that support. Certainly, there's a number of ways that could happen. Like, you could stay pretty low and never cross the main creek here, like the predominant creek, or you could jump out and trade across the creek and basically form out like a late week spring to get you down here and test. And all of this stuff would work. Now, that's only a bullish perspective, right? Like, that's not, that's obviously not a bearish perspective. So conceptually, does this work? Could you break out this way? Yeah, I mean, it's a weak looking move. There's no doubt about that. But sure, like, you could be on the move by this time next week. This looks reasonable to me. I would have preferred to, if we're going to get a drop, get it early in the week. So we didn't get one first thing. So maybe it doesn't happen till later. And it could be like a combination of these ideas. Like, maybe there's a small range that builds out into Tuesday, and then you get a little spring action or something, and then maybe that's when we advance back up. You know, so it's not like a one-size-fits-all here. Like, these are kind of mix and match. You could have a little bit of both in there. Big picture is you need to get over this red line, which is kind of the more dominant resistance. And then this outermost resistance is, in my opinion, the next big one. And I could see us using that resistance in combination with the upward cross here to basically keep us low and trading along this bottom. So anyways, that's kind of it for AMC right now. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. So basically, I'm like thinking if you're going to get that low and not go any farther, we don't want to go farther. We talked about that last night, because I think if you go farther, you're probably going to come down to 380. And then honestly, I think we'll probably just go ahead and go for the 3 gap. Like, I don't know why you wouldn't at that point. So if you're going to stay up high and maybe get the gap fill, maybe because that can prevent you from dropping, you can get the gap fill without breaking the new lows. That's a good thing. I could see it here or here as a possible bullish exit. GME, actually, it's kind of fascinating because GME to me looks... it actually looks pretty similar to what I drew, although, you might be thinking like, well, I don't know, man, you just had it going up afterwards, but I had it come up first and then come back down. And I don't know if that's the order it happened, but you have a big candle here on the 30-minute. So we obviously dipped low. It dipped beneath this little trend, which isn't a huge deal. Went to 23.25. This looks maybe a little distributive. So it came all the way back up to 24. It looks like a little rejection, and then you lost this outer creek, so it did break one more time. And that one's pretty important, so I'm going to get rid of this guy now. So that one's pretty important. I know y'all are thinking like, well, that didn't happen. No, it didn't, but I'm going to keep this stuff on here anyways, because you never know. Sometimes these early movements end up being really predictive of things that happen. It's just that your timing is off. So I'm going to keep them on the screen, even if that offends some people who might be like, hey, that didn't happen, dude, so don't keep it on there. Well, this happened, right? We kind of went up, fainted. We really did a feint. We didn't even get over the top, and then we came back down. So I'm going to get rid of that one. This is pretty close to what we were talking about last night, though, on the stream, because I figured, and I didn't know how to draw it exactly, but there's a trend right here, and I think I must have used a different time frame because this doesn't look right. Let's go to like 10 minutes. Yeah, I probably used this 10 or lower. I was looking at this guy as a possible kind of a wave cross, and it didn't hold. You can see it jumped over and then it failed here. So what I want to pay attention to is, did it break the creek? Okay, and the major creek I think is a little difficult to define because it's very much like an angle, but I'm thinking this blue guy is probably one of the more outer ones. This red guy, let's make it like a violet color, and we'll make it thicker, so like a lavendery color. I don't know, it's not really any easier to see. But these are from the two outer wicks. One is on the 14th, the other is way up here on June 12th. And this is just me doing preliminary analysis here before I kind of shut up for a bit. But this, to me, looks like the double hit. We talked about that. Like, it didn't quite make it there. And then notice, like, down here, we actually pushed above. So here you have, like, a rejection that doesn't even try. I mean, it just doesn't. It doesn't even try to cross the creek. It doesn't push it at all. I mean, imaginary resistance is imaginary, so sure, could it be an imaginary resistance, and it's not really that big of a deal? Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's just there, right? But then this clearly pushes farther out, regardless. You know, even if you were taking that on average, this is still out farther. So we were looking for a test of the midline. It got it, 2487, and then it's actually coasting down. And again, like, potentially at this point, the creek could be thought of as like lower because these didn't go as high, they didn't advance as far. So it may look to some that like my lines are just off. Like, shouldn't you just put your line down low? Well, yes and no. I mean, it is what it is. Maybe this is a little off. Maybe it's not, but that's where I had it drawn. So I'm just going to keep it there. I guess what I'm saying is I don't really care. Like, if it's a little bit off, it's not a big deal. I know that there's a resistance there, so what we really want to see is a support of some kind. I'm going to collapse these. These were just gentle targets that we may or may not hit. And then this was the marker that specifically we really wanted to see the early exit over. And again, that's like 2485. So I think if we don't get over 2485 today and hold the support, we could be in for a little bit more down because the setup here might be just setting up a larger drop. Springs like to do that. They'll come down and break low, and that actually ends up being like the support, like a phase B support down here, and then you'll get like an up thrust, and then it'll nosedive. So it's very possible that, as much as I want this to be a local spring action, and it's looking okay right now. It looks like it's about to cross this creek regardless. As much as I want it to be perhaps a local spring action, it would not surprise me if this bottom area also has to work itself out a little more and go sideways a bit until maybe a drop back down to 22. Yeah, and it's the same problem that AMC has. It's kind of in that same boat where, you know, the longer it takes, the more likely you are to get stuck. And the more likely you are to get stuck, the longer it takes, that kind of thing, sort of like chicken and the egg, meaning that, you know, we have made efforts to stay above this trend for a while. And once you get below it, and then you also can get below maybe the localized range, you may end up being really far from, this was kind of my worry, I suppose, if you want to say that, was that if you dropped here and you dropped really low, and then you went to these targets that everyone else is talking about, like down at like 1960 or even lower at like 17, you could be in a situation where you've opened up Pandora's box for time. You really could take a lot of time down here, at least a week, pretty easily. I find that to be a bit counterproductive based on the way this is set up. Like, we already traded this low, so it's a little strange to me to get shorted all the way back down through it unless you're just going to drop, you know? Like, I would imagine that an LPS or a local spring here on this floor at 2280 makes a lot more sense to me than dropping through just to trade down here. Seems a little unnecessary. Like, I know there's not a lot of trading that happened just above 16 or 17, or right 16 to 17, so that might be the area where maybe we're targeting. But like, it still seems a bit really silly in my opinion, I guess, to come all the way down at this point and try to trade low when, if you're trying to advance, you know. And that just makes me think that that would not be a stopping point, that you would probably go ahead and just go down for the creek. That's all that I would kind of draw from that. So that's where I'm at with that one. Some of these are not outdated. They just aren't really applying to our situation right now. So I'm going to get rid of a few that may not be as important to us at this moment. Yeah, the debt extension issue, that would be a move possibility, like having it come through. So no gap fill. Well, I mean, just ask the question. Just there's two things you just want to talk about, right? So one is, what does the gap fill accomplish? I mean, tell me, what does it accomplish? You know, if you can't answer that question, then I don't feel like anybody. If just because it happens doesn't mean that. You know, I think it's a bit of a intellectual problem where, like, a lot of people will say the gaps have to fill, and I'm like, well, why? Like, tell me what you think the reason is that the gaps are getting filled. Because it ain't because somebody likes the chart to just not have holes. I mean, that doesn't really make sense. It's not just some psychological thing. There's got to be a reason that we come back down after gaps. Is it because we traded without the market there and we've created a liquidity problem? Yeah, usually. I think that's kind of like the general answer. Is it an institutional marker? You know, is this part of some kind of a cycle where you're going from gap to bottom to gap, or going gap to top to gap? I know. I'm not trying to be like a jerk about it. I'm just saying, like, every time people ask that, I want to invite the conversation, because as I've gone around the last few years, a lot of folks will say the gap's going to fill and then we're just going to run. And that was what I was talking about last night, is like, well, yeah, it's possible in some circumstances. But in other circumstances, the gap is in a place where you've basically lost the range. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're just calling for a gap fill because it's the cool thing to do in the market. They don't always fill, you know. I think if we get a gap fill, maybe we get it here at the end of a range, or we get it here after jumping the bigger creek. That's kind of been my my position anyways. Like earlier I said I thought we might jump the creek before a bottom. That didn't happen, right? So I got that wrong. It went below 457. So after I got that wrong, you're like, okay, now what? Do you still think that's... Well, I'm not throwing out everything just because I got that one part wrong. Do I think being at 450 means that the 430 gap is more likely? Yeah. More probable? Sure. Because you're now beneath the range, so you can easily create a resistance and drive the price low. Whereas before, you were apparently, right? We had some kind of support here, though not really. Nobody showed up on Friday. You know, it was just low volume iterations down. Just pushed it through the floor like it was nothing. You know, just kind of embarrassing for bulls, to be honest. Just nobody was there. It was just like, whatever, do whatever you want. You know, all right, I guess no one's involved in this, you know, volume-wise. We're just going to push it down and go for it. So, yeah, right now, do I think it's more probable that the gap fills? Yeah. But does it change my position about the gap in general? And the answer is no. Do I think it has to fill? No. I just don't. It might fill over here. It might not. There's also the chance here that this is just like an LPS. I mean, you can go back to the January run up and look at the gaps that were left during the reaccumulation. There's a couple gaps there that are left open, especially after the big January sell-off. There's one gap particular back to the upside in like February of 2021. And we did something similar. We came right to it, and then we left it open. We just didn't fill it because it didn't want to break the range, I guess. Like there was a low dip, and then we kind of come out and we formed a higher low. So we went down, pushed back out in a phase B kind of area, and then came back down, and we just left. And the gap remained the gap until it was like $14. There was a $14 gap or something like that. And then there was another one below it at like $9. I think it was the $9 one. Those gaps didn't fill for like a year. So what I'm saying right now is that the way this sets up, it could be, well, I'm not positive, but it could be that this is like a localized spring just for this range. I'm nervous because it looks more like a sign of weakness, and that was the big thing I didn't want to have happen. I wanted them to have strength here, push up, then come down. I wouldn't be asking that question right now if we had done that. But we didn't do that, so you take the chart as it is. And as it is, it's easier, I think, at this point to reject and try to drive the price low. You could do an up thrust and then drive the price back down and get the gap fill pretty easily. So I'm not going to sit here and proclaim to you that I don't think it won't fill or I don't think it's going to fill. I'm just saying, like, do I think there's a liquidity need to come back down and fill that gap? Probably not. Do I think there might be a need to check the support at 430? Maybe. We tested it once. We drove down through it, and then we bought way up above it and distributed up here around 550. And now we're driving back down to it. So like in theory, that's a pretty classic looking bottom structure. But I would usually advocate for in that structure is I would usually advocate for a higher low. Like I wouldn't want it to come all the way back down and just hit the same mark. So what I mean is, like, if I saw this structure and it was a sell-off and then I saw it do this and react high back above the bounce, my immediate thought here is that no matter what happens, I don't really want it to come back below that support that was made on the way in. If it's going to be a quick bottom, my thought is I want it to kind of stay above this guy. That's pretty normal. I think most people would feel that way. And that would be an adequate retracement, perhaps. Because as soon as we start going down here, you just open up all kinds of possibilities. So yesterday on the stream I talked about it, and I said the good news is that you can fill this gap without actually breaking below the bottom. So there's nothing to say Unlike some other times, there's nothing to say that we have to fill that gap and then we'll just run. Like you could say that here. I think it's okay. Makes sense? I need to talk about gaps for like 30 minutes, I know. I don't want to do that. But yes, so is it possible that we hit 430 in the next week or so? Absolutely. Does it break the range? No, not really. I would like to see it if it's going to happen in a very concise action and then jump back above supports, specifically back up here at 460s. That would be really positive. I do not really want to see it tap and then come up and reject at the 460 mark. That could just be an indication that either we're range bound or that we're going to head down again low and retest the next bottom at 410, which really isn't much of a bottom in my opinion. Looking back, it's kind of like this same area we distributed from before, so I'm not really feeling a drop down there. I don't know about you guys. Yeah, and the creek, as I see it, is very low. I think it's way down here, so if it keeps breaking down, it's not positive. So as a bottom goes, if I saw this kind of price action and then I saw it jump the creek, and this is where I think the rubber meets the road, right? Because you guys want to know, like, well, how do I know if it's bullish? If I saw this kind of price action, if you saw this kind of price action, right, and it makes a higher low here than the previous low, that's really positive. That's like a really good sign. If it hits the same low, it's kind of more like a double bottom in some ways, and it could present problems. But if it makes a higher low here, I think it's even more positive. And then once you jump that creek, all you have to then see is a backup and then like an SOS, and you're good to go. So it reduces the amount of, I guess, stressors, I suppose, if we went ahead and left here. And we can go ahead and advance. There's still some things I would be concerned about in the advancement, but as long as you make an SOS and not an up thrust, it should just continue. It's that simple. So those markers are not as complicated as it sounds. I've got them all marked off. So there's some key levels here at like 5, obviously, 530s to 540s, and then $6 basically, $5.95. And those are the areas you'd want to see that happen. Where's the creek? This is a little trickier because we have an up thrust through it here. I think the red mark is the main creek. I think the yellow one over to the side, let's make it a different color. We'll make it like green or something. So the red one is your main creek. That's like the big one. I don't count up thrusts if they come on the second cat ear as part of the main creek most of the time, because that's the design of them, is that they're breaking through the creek and then retreating under it. Are they providing you with another wick that you can measure to? Yes. So I think sometimes as a structure, right, and that's what I've got drawn over here on the red, sometimes as a structure, they're giving you like some signposts maybe that we could use structurally. That's fine. That's totally normal, and I think that makes sense. But as a creek, I wouldn't really call it that. You know, I think this area above the red is the creek. So that's the way I'm going to define it. So it's not that far off. Like as the crow flies, if we went straight up right now, it'd be like 475. It's not that far. We've come low. The whole point of a spring is that you're getting a low liquidity dive and you're crossing the creek lower as a result. So if we had a problem jumping over it, which we clearly had some kind of issue, we bonked our heads on it like 20 times and just did not go, right? Now it's a really strong line, right? So you drive the price low. Maybe you're going for the gap fill at the same time. If you get that buy-in and the push out, I think you can just jump it. And now when we return to 481, we're doing it in strength, not in like a weakness where we're kind of walking down into it. So that's ideal. That would give me a very strong feeling of, okay, we might have some serious upside back to the top of the range, at least back to this like 550 area. You know, I think that would be a given if you were able to make that jump. And then from there, we'd have to wait and see what happens. 550 and then at 6. pretty straightforward, but that could be a way of getting out. GME is much the same way. It's pretty much the exact same chart. The purple is more or less the stronger creek at this point, and that's the one we're kind of edging over right now. We're chopping along it now, so we drove the price low. This is your spring action in the local spring action, which drove beneath this floor. I mean, there's like little things here localized. It's not like big picture, but sure, like if this took off, do I still think it could make it to the top? Yeah, because even though it didn't do it like necessarily at the exact time we wanted it to do it, you can see like if I draw from here to, let's say, the bottom, and let's say that spring was the bottom, is that still the 50% marker for that cross? The answer is yes. It is. So from a mathematical standpoint, is this an even cross, around that bull trend? Yeah. So it's an even 50-50 if that remains the low. The low that we got first thing this morning, like 22, 23, it's perfect. So does that mean you could come all the way back up and hit this marker? Yeah, it does. It's not a guarantee because just like anything in the market, you have there's other areas you could stop, and we don't really know for a fact, this is what it's going to look like, which is why clearly it hasn't happened the way I thought it was going to look. And timing wise, we're still thinking like Tuesday midday could be where you see that move. I mean, GME has had these really rapid fire advancements at different times. This took a whole day, but it was really quick. It's only 47 bars here. It's a fast move. So a similar advancement would be still Tuesday, like tomorrow by close, gets you the same move. So is it possible that we make that same move back up and go up higher? Yeah, I mean, it's not that unheard of. It could all happen in a day easily from where we are now at 23 up to 35. So that's why I said I'm going to keep this marker on, even though, price-wise, like this didn't really work out. From a technical standpoint, like that doesn't mean the target's gone. You waiting to see if it can make the jump. I think if the jump happens, you could still see it come up. I mean, I'm going to stick to it, I guess, and by end of day Tuesday, technically it could still come up and pretty easily make it to the target. Confirmations there. First confirmation would be up here above 26. The main reason for that is that green line, which is the main uptrend. You don't want it to hook there. You don't want it to push up and reject. So you'd have to see it confirm. This is a parallel, this blue one. We don't really have to worry about that too much, but it is being respected. It's in the similar region right here. So kind of where this blue arrow is. This is basically where you find your confirmation at this point, if it's going to come up in this little pocket. You'd have to find some support here and then break above the top at 25.92. And then I think the next confirmation is probably going to be this 27 area right here. And that's all I could say about it for now. So if it's going to happen, it'd be here, then here. Makes sense? So like a push up there, a push up there. I know, I just got lines going straight up. IWM looks pretty good. It looks very close to what we drew. So I'm happy with it. This is very positive in my book. Anytime there's it's not just because it's what I drew, but it's what it's representing, right? So what I drew here was really darn close because what I wanted to see was, I wanted to see jump this guy. I'm a little nervous about that gap there on the 30 minute. A little gap up might be a problem, but I guess we could come back. It's not a huge deal. We could retrace back down if we need to. But yeah, I wanted to see it advance above 202, which we got. So we got to push over 202. I didn't think we would just leave a gap behind. I thought we would probably have a pullback. Right now you can see it's hitting on those 30-minute moving averages. That doesn't really mean a whole lot. I just thought I wanted to see it jump the creek, come back down. So jump the creek, push above 202, and come back down and find support. So the rest of this may not be as fast as I've drawn it. I have it drawn like immediately going up, but at this point, because of that gap, we could probably see it come back low, deep retracement, and then advance again. And this is where you'd end up above 202 potentially if it can do it. So far so good. It looks really nice. And getting above 202 is a really big deal here. Really big deal. This is the structure on the bottom. It does look like a series of almost head and shoulders. I'm not going to count it like that because this would be a really bizarre shoulder. Maybe it's a neckline. I don't know. Or maybe that's the head. I have no idea how you'd look at that. The point is, look at it. It's a very, very popular support and resistance here. So while we've been bearish, meaning we're bearish in this lower region, 202 has acted as the main resistance. Here, maybe here. 1, 2, 3. There's a hook there. 4, maybe 5 times. This one's kind of in the middle. And then it's also acted as support, 1, 2, and we'll see maybe 3 times over here. This is where it was lost. And then even before that, looking way back, the 202 has been pretty significant for support and resistance. So I find it to be a really compelling one. I think the reason I drew it was probably because it was a previous high, but it's acting a lot more like almost like a middle line now for this structure. So in terms of an SOS, that might be like kind of the middle of it. Let's take a look. Hang on. Yeah, it's from way back. It's the high, so it's important. That's pretty normal for an SOS. So what you would see is the SOS sign of strength comes above the topmost resistance, and then it chops along it. It's not always like a center line. In this case, it's pretty close to one. So us getting back above that and then finding support on it would be absolutely critical in order for this move to happen. So, hold on to your butts, right? Get prepared, I guess, because if it was to go back up here and find support above 202, it's in perfect place to just move right back up to 214, break over 207. Really clean setup if it can cross. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely convinced it's going to happen this week. I don't really know how to read it as timing-wise other than the trajectory, which is this pink line. So the pink line makes it look like it would happen this week, but I don't put a whole lot into that. I think it's just estimation. Historically, are they good estimations? Yeah, they're decent, but they don't always follow a trend. You can abandon a trajectory for a little bit and then come back to it later. So it isn't one that I would look at as oh, it has to be within X amount of this or else. Nah. And then trajectories also do get abandoned. They might follow for a reaction here and then drop down and just leave it. And, at that point you're talking about drastic changes to the chart, but yeah. In terms of a bigger creek, this is kind of what I'm looking at, and I think you can see why. So we just pushed it up again today. Here we moved and re-advanced. Not too crazy about RSI here on the 1 hour, but hopefully it would have time to chill out. I think on lower time frame or on higher time frames, everything's fine. It's all 50. I remember we looked at this last night, so it looked pretty good. So sure, at this point, staying above 200, probably ideal. Ignoring all the other gobbledygook on this chart, I think it's looking fairly straightforward. If it can hold above 202, at some point find support on it, it's good. So my initial thought of this is we should probably be using it as a creek, and that's what I'm doing. So since this pushed higher, so this is the rule, right? If you advance and then you advance again, that's kind of the last known high spot, right? Back here, this was at 190, right? It was below 202. Then we advanced again to 202.70. Well, the guidance for that would be that if you're just looking at the peaks, clearly this is like a fan, right? You'd be like, oh, well, it moved up over that creek to this one. That's easy. But in terms of like the major trend, in this case, this EMA is giving us a lot of help on the 1 hour because it's kind of showing you where that resistance is. But you can see it visually. These look more like up thrusts that are trying to help you drive the price back down. Whoopsie. Oh man, I hate when it does that. Oh my goodness. I just have like an EMA by itself. There we go. Sorry, I must have clicked something. I knew how to fix it, but it's just annoying. So in moving forward, you can have an advancement here over this downtrend essentially. And if you find support, I think it's going to be around that 202. So I would look at this really tiny move carefully today because it could help you define over the next couple of days here. It could help you define a more definite markup. The way I have it now is very temporary. All I have is one top, really. There's like two little wicks up here. But this could provide a really simple, over the next couple of days or so, if it doesn't just run. If you get this back up to, let's say Tuesday or Wednesday or whatever it is, to that gap, you might have some tops that you could use, and then it's going to give you a stronger sense of like where that jump is and where we might need to go back to. So I'm drawing it kind of loosey-goosey, but this may be something where it needs to come a little lower and then you don't advance till after you do that and move over, so on and so forth. This is how you could narrow in on a potential breakout. And if you're wondering like, well, does IWM do this every time? Yeah, it does. Almost every single time on these bottoms, there's some kind of an M shape because it's defining and then retesting a major creek. So yes, are they just trends? Yeah, some of them are. Some of them are a little weird. Like this one's a little weird. This one actually jumped over and then it sort of does it again. And you can see like it's sort of giving you a picture of, it's not a very confusing picture, of a cross here that ultimately isn't met till the bottom. And then even further, you can see like some of the outermost points on this aren't met till way later. So this is a weird one. And there's no guidance on it up in the top. There's nothing here that would really tell you. I'm sure there's a couple wicks we could find, but I would have been guessing if I had tried to point it out ahead of time. This one's like nice because it's simple. Like, oh, it's just the trend. That one over here is not the trend, not really. Yeah, so kind of tricky. Maybe you could have used the lower trend here. That might have helped. Sometimes the perceived creek that we see later is really just like a parallel, like an outer trend. The market's just creating like an opposite reaction kind of move. That's probably what this is. So you would take that and drive the price up, and there it is. And then you can see it a little more clearly. All right, so this is actually the creek. It pushes it, breaks out, and comes back and retests it. But we didn't have that information very easily available till this bottom was in. And we could identify that trajectory perhaps. Tricky, right? So it's not always like black and white, like, oh, it's just the trend. Well, what's the trend, right? This one looks pretty straightforward, I think. I think it's like this waveform, right? And it's pulling it down, in my opinion, as a dive to get shake out paper hands, and also prepare for upside. So let me see. MACD is looking a lot better here on the 1 hour. But I remember we looked at it on the higher time frame. Maybe it was the other chart. Actually, that looks fine. That looks good on the 3 hour. Let's try 4 hour. I thought one of them looked kind of meh. Maybe it was GME. This looks good. It just crossed back up. It's not crossing zero, but it's crossing its the averages are crossing, so RSI is doing something similar. Looks okay. We got a weekly. Yeah, weekly was the one I think I was concerned about because it looked like the move was really positioned downward and like it hadn't found a base yet. And because it has these two downward motions, they're both kind of weak volume. So sometimes it just depends on your point of view, but that might indicate to you that there needs to be more downside. So I think that's a possibility. But this is a massive chart, so who knows. This one, I mentioned the kind of a hidden divergence in price versus RSI. It's debatable. Some people might say it's bearish because the RSI is coming down. I think it's a resetting of RSI because it looks like they reset it back to 50 at like the same price that it was at coming up, but the RSI was like more overheated. So it looks a lot stronger now for a possible advancement. Though I could see the argument that like, well, it's going the opposite way. You know, I don't know. We're going sideways. I think sometimes, and the volume doesn't look really sell-offish. It looks like actually it looks like it's lessening as we're going across, which is good because it's rounding off and the volume is rounding off. It looks fine to me. It looks like a big push out, a lot of buy-in, and then we're just kind of waiting, see what kind of pullback we need, and or find support, and then we're going. And that's my opinion. Man, MPW, this thing, not everybody's favorite, but definitely one that I'm watching carefully. Heavily invested in it. Obviously, I want to watch it, but more than that, it's been an interesting ride because it has some really clear bottoms that are really nice. Like this bottom was super slick, and it would have been easy to trade this particular bottom, but then it left it behind, right? And right now, to be very, very straightforward, it looks like it's really wrapping around this like as if a wedge, right? So you're seeing like a push down, and I've got this going way up because I might want to redraw it now that some time has passed, because this may or may not be the right thing to look to anymore, this particular one. So I'm going to look for another that might be a little stronger. This one looks okay, but it's not what I want. This one's jumped, and then this one's jumped. This is the one I was looking at for the depression to see if it could come back up above the floor. So I had mapped out what I thought would be an efficient looking spring. I did this like probably on June 13th. So here we are like 10 days later. So did this stand the test of time? Does it look like anything that we see locally? Yeah, kind of. I mean, what we've accomplished or we've seen accomplished here looks like it happened later. So it's almost like the same exact thing that you see here. Oh my gosh. It's almost the same motion. I don't know why that happened, but it happened. So it's bizarre because we looked at this and we were like, oh, this is what we want to see. But then it never jumped the creek. It just kind of failed and then went lower and did it again. So was the spring successful? Well, yeah, if it holds here, it is. I had two tests in mind. One was 485, one was 477. Anything can happen in the stock market, but right now, what I'm looking for now is support on 487. This to me looks almost exactly like what we wanted to see, right? You got some high volume selling going into this low and then a very low volume buy back out by comparison. And if you can find those supports where you need them, then you're in really good shape. So the first one was around 477, and we found that support. There's like a double tap on that area here. This is an M-shaped cross, so you jumped over, now you're advancing again. You got a little bit of a support on 482. I had that one marked off because of the previous bottom. Otherwise, I don't know why else this is very important. It doesn't seem to matter too much here, although it is where we kind of sold off from going into this deeper spring. So again, it kind of repeated the same thing. So I originally thought this was going to be it. I was like, oh, this is probably the spring. As it looked right. I was like, there's your up thrust, there's your dive, there's the heavy liquidity. And then for whatever reason, the market was like, nope, we're not doing that. We're going to do a whole nother week. Exactly the same as the first week. This is a Monday to Friday thing, and this is a Monday to Friday thing. I mean, it's literally like repeat, rinse, repeat. But notice the difference is this one, when it pushed low, didn't ever recover. This one, when it pushed low, it came right back up into the previous region. So at this venture, it's looking positive. It's looking really positive. So it did what we wanted it to do. It just took a lot longer than I was hoping for. And it is nerve-wracking because you're like, well, what if it's just a big hook and then it dumps? It's still possible, right, Booksy? I mean, I guess so. I would say that in general at this point, based on this setup, just again looking back at where these markers are up top, there's not really a huge draw for concern here. We've had the test low. If it dropped again, it could come all the way back down to 474. And I wouldn't bat an eye because, I mean, that could be this outer creek being tested. So the one thing that would concern me would be coming back below the bottom. I don't think there should be a need for that at this point. Again, kind of take it as it goes. So I think this possibility of this 1-2 and then another 1-2 with a bigger drop, it makes sense to me. I could see that. And I would like for it to not go below 482, but I don't think that, that would be confirming this support. But again, I don't really think that 477 is bad. If it went back there, it would probably just be a 50% retracement of this little uptrend. So anyways, looking really good. The bigger question was, where is the SOS? And I think it's still up here at 575. But in order to get there, we obviously need to see it break this outermost creek. So the whole point of the spring, again, is to get you the liquidity you need to push out. So until that happens, you really are kind of waiting regardless. Oh, this looks good, this looks good, this looks good. It's checking boxes. But until that push happens, unfortunately, we don't really have the confirmation we want. I'm going to venture a guess that it might happen here at 5 on the dot. As an even number. It's basically where we built a sideways support previously. And then I think we might go ahead and advance back towards the top again. So this is a auto reaction, support, phase B, top, debatably a spring or phase B bottom. I mean, again, maybe worst case scenario is we advance to 5 and then it dumps hard. And that's where the spring is, you know what I mean? Then you go. I guess I'm just looking at it from my point of view, I don't know, kind of looks like it bottomed to me here and then dived for a spring. But I bet you Stockfather would look at it and tell me that I'm wrong. He'd probably be like, there's no spring there, Booksy. Okay. I think it's there. It's hard to say, man. Some markets or some stocks have springs that are 1 penny. And you're like, okay, that was it? It created a floor and then that was it. That's what you're telling me? Yep. I mean, AMC was like that back in that January move. It dropped a few pennies. That was it, And then it ran and you're like, okay, I guess that was it. So I don't really know. Sometimes they're super dramatic and obvious like this. Sometimes they're just kind of subtle dips down. You only really know it's a spring if it jumps over the creek, so. Yeah, so at this venture, I just want to see it jump up over 5 and hold support if it's a creek. A spring rather. So we get a creek jump here, hold over 5. That'd be pretty good confirmation for potential upside. So the other question was well, where is the SOS? Because it didn't happen here. You were measuring it based on this. So where else could it be? Well, they gave us one more point of interest, which was this upthrust. And that's pretty much, like, as far as I could go with it right now. Like, we could look at every single one of these and pick out which one we think is more likely. So here you have that. So I guess the best way to do it wouldn't even be to use that. Probably use this and use the middle, because I think that would be more accurate anyways. Middle's right there. So instead of using the upthrust, use the little tiny chop region right here. This little pinching point on this little tiny cat here. Looks like that might be the key, because it's the midline. At least between the current top and the current bottom, that's the 50% mark. So it's a halfway mark. So it looks like you may get to SOS by Friday. Again, potentially. That's a big move. So this is a different kind of a call out, because I mean, it's sort of like the GME one. I mean, you're talking about it moving almost all the way back up the range. That's pretty significant. So sort of just taking the same exact thing I drew earlier and just moving it over, since I misread that, unfortunately. Yeah, you would have to see something like this going into Friday, and then really you want to advance past it, so maybe Monday is even better. It's a bit much. I kind of doubt it doesn't go down again. I think it's going to go down again, so I don't think we necessarily move till like Tuesday or Wednesday. I'd be kind of surprised if it went just straight up. This seems very possible though at this point. It just has to make the right adjustments. Let me see if structurally this makes sense also from a wave perspective. So I don't know why this is, and maybe it's just the way that these things are designed. But usually, yeah, these trajectories, I'm going to use the fib fan methodology here. These trajectories, I'm looking specifically at these tops and these tops. These trajectories usually give you the signposts that you need for the way out. So yeah, they're adequate. So I would say that this is the confirmation here. It looks good. And then from the bottom, we did this measurement previously. Is this a 50-50 move? Yeah, actually 50-50 from the center. It looks like it would take you up to 580. So maybe let's put a mark up here at 580. Maybe further out then. Maybe over here on Wednesday of next week. Seems more reasonable. That works well. Yeah, this still would have to come back pretty quick though, I think. I think we would, it looks like it just straight up. I think we'd have to spend more time right here at 5. Like, so this would probably be more sideways than anything else. And then the advancement would from there be pretty quick. Sure. So this kind of checks a lot of boxes for me. So what I did is I used like a fan approach. Like they clearly marked off levels on the way down. Approximations, right? Of like, oh, this is where you have support and resistance on some kind of a Fibonacci sequence fanning downward. This doesn't give you everything, all the information you need, but it gives you some. So these are upward momentum creeks. Like this is the trend up, this is the trend up, this is the trend up, right? As we are doing these LPS type deals coming down, LSPYs. And then if you were to advance, then you can look in reverse and you can see like, are they matching up with, where do they match up with the creek crosses that you would expect, and where do they match up with levels that are important? And right here, they're matching up pretty well. This is some key levels. So without getting any more detailed, than that. I would say that these are the levels that I would look at as potential markers for an advancement. Just kind of wrapping around these fans. And then what else can we do? Well, I guess we can do another trajectory in, trajectory out, since we have a new bottom. I haven't looked at this in a while, so I'm kind of reading into it right now. So trajectory in is roughly 56 degrees, trajectory out roughly 56 degrees. So does the trajectory out also match the expectations of like how it would climb through this fan, how it would climb across the levels to get back to the top potentially? Yeah. So I would say this is an adequate setup. Again, trajectories are trajectories. They're not meant to be like hard lines, you know. They might follow them at times, but they're not designed that way. So this actually makes it look like by Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday we'd be up here at 5. So potentially in the next 2 days we're at 5, and then by Monday next week we'd be around 5:30, and then by Friday, July 5th, we might be up here at 580. And then I guess we'll see from there. We probably have to start going back to some big picture stuff. But I imagine if we SOS, we're probably just gonna, and it's successful, we're probably just gonna take off above the previous high. I think we would just advance. I think the trend goes up very far. Hang on, let me not fudge that, because I actually really like this trend. So I want to keep it correct. Yeah, so potentially if it were to SOS at 582, you probably see the advancement go. There's some level of support at 712, so that might be important. But I think potentially it could go all the way up to 775. That's a jump over the major creek. Let me see. From this level on the support at 560, yeah, that's a pretty clean move. It's a 50-50 around this high trajectory we have and the creek level. So I don't know how fast that would go. I'm not going to even try that, but I want to mark the levels off. It'd be like that. And that'd be your big July move. This coincides really well with what we would see on IWM, because we marked it off and it looked like we would get to this push up by about the 15th, by mid-July, I think even earlier. Like trajectory wise and everything, I know it's very bullish, but it looked like we would be going up here by to 214 by about the 10th, and then coming back down for a retracement. And this was where I have questions about it, but coming back down for a retracement before August. So one big move up in July, and then retracement for another chunk of July before an August move perhaps. That's just estimation. Yeah, maybe. It's one or the other. I think this could end up going all the way to 780 by early July. It kind of fits the bill. Just boop, 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 and then come back down for that late August. So yeah, I actually think MPW is looking pretty good, but there's one big problem. So I just did the analysis, so if you missed it, you might want to rewind a bit, but this spring action that we first thought was a spring action duplicated itself and actually became what looks like a spring action. And it's strange, but that's what happened. It was literally 1 week and then a whole nother week of the same exact thing, but you ended up pushing higher and recovering. So it found an adequate bottom here, and then what needs to happen is a support over 487. We've gotten the 477 support and push. I wouldn't be overly surprised if we saw it come back down again. My bigger concern is that this is like a phase B bottom and not an actual spring. I think it's a spring. I think it's a spring because there's a bottoming that happened right here that's lower than the previous one, and it's at 477. I think it's a spring because it dropped, raced up higher than that little range that was built, so it went up above the floor again, and then dropped through it. That was making me think it's a spring. But in terms of volume, to be honest, like the initial drop looks more like a spring to me, so I don't know. So one thing I'd have to be careful about here is overstating it, like saying like, oh, this is definitely what this is. And it might be, but it could be that we're actually just setting up for a bigger downward move. So that's sort of the danger of MPW right now. I really don't know. If it doesn't advance above the creek here up at near 5, or if it fails to even get there and then starts nosediving, you know, it's possible we're just setting up like a much larger setup here. We're going to see a big pump and then a huge drop down. I can't really predict that, to be fair to myself, except just to say, like, I don't know about volume. I mean, that's kind of the big thing. The recovery volume's fine. It's the selling volume that kind of bugs me. You know, I don't know. Maybe we need to see one big move up, and then we do need to see another massive slide, and then recover hard, and then that would be where you jump. So it's one or the other. If I'm just basing it on the timing, I would say it probably goes ahead and moves up. But I would want it to see it maybe come back, find support at 482, and then come up and jump and find support at 485, and then advance. This is hard to say. Like, I know what needs to happen for it to be bullish. I just don't know exactly if it's going to go the way I draw it out, you know. So, back to AMC. Let's see how the day ends. Actually, looking pretty good. So it came back up, 450, 451. It's basically nothing today, which might seem like nothing, but I don't really feel that way if we've made some kind of an advancement on the structure, and I think we did. So I had marked these off in hopes that we were going to get a big run on Friday, like the very end. We kind of got this influx of volume, but then nothing happened. So here we've got a new structure on the bottom that we have to respect. It has a low of 445. Again, nothing really to be done about that. So it's possible we need to do some kind of late range move down. That's not really determined yet. This is just starting. There's just nothing really to say here about it except we jumped over a creek. So if I were going to look at this objectively and say, is this moving in a more bullish direction right now? The answer is yeah. So this had gone almost parabolically down. Now it's bouncing out and seems to be finding a kind of bottom beneath the previous floor, which, you know, is not always the best. But that's okay if it's a spring action bottom. So if there's low volume down here and it can recover back above 457, then it's okay. You know, that's why I marked it off on my chart at 459 because it's a little higher, but I would want to see it recover above here after whatever bottoming action needs to take place. So the current positivity of this is that we made a higher low. We didn't come quite down as far. Actually, it looks like it made double bottom. I don't know. These wicks are not... I don't get it. Maybe it's a 1 second chart thing or something. So this bottom is, yeah, it's 445. And this low is also 445. Well, there you have it. I mean, it doesn't look like it's touching, but whatever. It's a lower 445. This is 445.0, and this is 445.5 or something like that. You know, I don't know. That doesn't make any sense. But 4.44455 or something. That would make That would make me some sense. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to turn up the volume on it. So it's already pretty loud. If I speak up, I don't want it to blow your eardrums out. So I usually set it at about 18 decibels average. So you have to turn up your microphone or something. If I speak away from it, it might sound quieter for a minute. That's my fault. But I don't want to jack it up and then have like it blowing your ears out if I get louder all of a sudden. You wouldn't want that. You get distortion, audio distortion, real bad. I can turn it up like a little bit, but I'm not going to turn it up much because, again, like if I jack it all the way up, it's going to be way too loud if I speak up. Yeah. I'm not an audio engineer, but I've done a lot of that stuff before, and you got to be really careful with microphones. It's better to just kind of ebb to the low side, as they can be really bad if they start distorting. You don't want them to like red out. So unfortunately, that means that your speakers or your sound system might not be outputting very much. I don't know. I can't tell you. I have no idea. I turned it up a little bit, but I'm not going to turn it up anymore because then it's going to start having problems. Yeah, so this looks right now pretty positive on AMC. Nothing really negative here. We got 10 minutes left in the day, so let's just see it hold, and this is fine. GME. Honestly, if it can hold a higher high, or excuse me, if it can hold a higher low here, I'd probably be pretty happy. I don't really expect much else today. It did not, unfortunately, this is kind of the negative here, it did not hold over that creek. You can see every subsequent push was smaller and smaller and smaller. So it looks like we're getting kind of a secondary push down. So we may actually get a little bit of we may need a little bit of a jump start. Jumper cables. Yeah. Here, I'm going to make it way bigger. There's nothing particularly bad about this setup. Like I see a heavy volume buy-in here on this bottom. Again, just like the previous bottoms, everything looks good volume-wise. There's no heavy sell-off. This is very, very good. You do not want heavy volume sell-off, especially at a previous support level. And we're not getting any of that here, which is great. So that's really good. So I think a lot of this is just shakeout. It's designed to kind of freak you out, but the volume is weak sauce on these sell downs. So it's important that it's very easy to move the stock. Important to like be able to move it very swiftly without a lot of sellers in your way. So a lot of what we're seeing, I think, is seller exhaustion here. And y'all are like, well, if it keeps making new lows, they're not exhausted. That's true, but eventually you won't make a new low and you'll push out and you'll be done. So right now, I think they try to advance the creek again. We see that test and then it's sort of pushing backwards and we're moving back down to lows. This is a low of 23.26, 23.25. Actually, that goes lower. So yeah, just barely. Again, I don't get what the wicks are. What's the problem with these wicks on TradingView? It definitely doesn't look any lower. The other one looked higher and it was the same price. All right. So 23.25 looks like the marker now for the low. So is this a failed advancement of the creek on a Monday? Probably. So we'll see how the rest of this goes. It's really hard to say with this kind of price action. It could very easily be that this is the bottom and it just takes off and we never see it again. It could also be that there's still another low at play in the future. I don't really want to predict that right now. Point is we tried to advance over the creek and we kind of failed to do so. Mixed bag on GME. I'm looking at these lower hits. It's also below that, so all these walkdowns are really consistent. The volume isn't going any higher. I mean, that's a little higher, but this is basically the same. So my guess is that once we break this little channel, we're probably going to be off to the races. If we can break it to the upside, I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. So I think if we can jump this channel, we're basically out of the creek, and then we can just leave. Then we're going to go back up and test. Hopefully. There's space here to do whatever. You know, if we wanted to chop and come low again or what have you. But, yeah, I think at that point, we're probably in good shape to continue advancing back above 2485. So maybe a good turnaround Tuesday action on AMC and GME and just getting those push outs. GME just kind of failed to hold it. I don't know. Maybe we'll see a wick into close or something. But you think it's going to hit 2275 in after hours? Yeah, I mean, I got 2275 on my chart. I got a 2274. That's from the bottom over here. Maybe. You know, it seemed like that was the way we were going. And there's a, I don't want to call it like a creek. It's not really what it is. It's sort of like a midline for this waveform. And you can see we've kind of passed back above it. And oftentimes you need to hit it before you advance. So if you were looking at a wedge and you drew a line right down the middle of the wedge, you would see that at the end of that wave, it would probably hit the middle. And normally it's not that narrow. Usually it's about 60% down the way that you would hit that middle and then take off one way or the other, depending on which way it's breaking. So I've got this marker drawn, and from where I sit, I'm not 100% sure that's correct, but I think it's close. And so it may be that we haven't hit it yet, so I could see that as a possibility. You're right, 2275 maybe. It could be that this morning was a hit, so that's, I mean, it did dip down into it, so I don't know. And if I have it drawn like slightly off, you could easily say like that's where it's supposed to be. And then it's done. I don't know. That's a debatable thing. The only way for me to do that would be to like measure every one of these bottom to tops and see if I can find kind of an average center for this wedge type action, this narrowing, and just sort of figure it out from there, like eyeball it. So either we need to go ahead and make the dip and get the double bottom, and that's where the center is, or we already hit it. I mean, either way, it's not a big deal. I'd still say once this breaks, you're going to go. So, yeah, I think probably pretty fast, too. I mean, there is a little bit of space here for some chop, like a big up thrust and then pull back. But then after that, I'm not sure you're just going to go nowhere. We already traded this area, so in theory, during a markup, after you do the spring, if you can get over the creek, you don't really spend a lot of time trading anymore. You kind of just go, you know, you just sort of move. You go through the motions. So you go from like bottom support at like 2370 or 2370, and then you would just go straight up to middle support at 2485, and then right up to top support at 2585. They're all the same. It's like 2380, 2480, 2580. Kind of evenly spaced. That would be a really simple way to walk out of here and start your advancement. So usually there's not a lot of backup unless you need a big backup after the major creek jump. You might get a choppy backup. So AMC's pushing. I think it did make its move up right into close here. Don't go too crazy, AMC. Just chill out for a second. So what did we say? This wasn't actually a higher low. It was like a double bottom. I don't really want it to like head fake into close. 457, that's the previous bottom area over here. Could be like a double hook, but this looks fine. I'm just watching where the volume is. I don't see a lot of heavy selling here in the top. So going into tomorrow, you don't want to see, I don't really care if there's a post-market action down or something for either stock. You just don't really want to see this head fake up above and then come back through at this point. It'd be better to drop low, frankly. I'd rather see it kind of gap down, you know, than anything else, as bad as that sounds. But I guess we'll find out. Tuesday was the day. So some kind of a support above 454 would be necessary, and then support above 457. And hard to say at that point what happens, you know. Timing wise, you could potentially like advance tomorrow like super fast, and each of these guys could be met pretty quickly. Basically straight up through here back to the 470s, which is absolutely, I think, a place we're going to go back to. This marker is a previous bottom on that little range, so I don't think we ever tested it. I think we went up above it and dropped. We never got back there, so that would be a very strong place to go check like the bigger creek, the red line. It's probably where you're going to get a hook or you're going to get a confirmation. It makes sense to me. That could be like an end of the Tuesday kind of thing. Yep, 486 right at close. That's good. That's a positive sign. Yeah, it's kind of trying to hold support above here. Still don't really think that makes a huge difference. It's into close, so it's hard to say. I mean, if it gapped up tomorrow, I'd be like, cool, but whatever. I'm not looking for that. I'd rather just see it make the appropriate moves. So yeah, coming back down here is fine. I'm happy that it went back down to 45. That's the secondary test you want. Let's see, IWM. That doesn't surprise me. We kind of mentioned very briefly when I was looking at this earlier that it felt like it could probably come back to that gap. So there's not much of a gap here on the 2 hour, but it opened. Let's see, the low here is 253. This closed at 229. So, and 29 being cents, sorry, 53 being cents. So yeah, there's still a little gap there, 20-cent gap. So it would not surprise me if we needed to come back. It's probably like a 50% retracement too. Yeah, something like that. Makes sense. So we might get to the 618 at 200. I just wanted to say above 200. Everything else is irrelevant right now. If it can hold the support at 200, it'll fill the gap, and then we should see it hopefully advance after that. This setup is looking pretty good, minus like some obvious issues that happened last Friday. And I addressed those last night. Not all is lost. Yeah, I don't know, man. That 6 minute looks rough. Whatever. We'll see what happens. We'll take a look tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, positive for the day is good, but it's really just sideways. So this kind of price action is okay. Like, it looks like to me, it looks like a fairly heavy volume buy-in with almost a spring-like quality to it. And then there's a low volume top, very low volume top. walk down and then another buy-in on the upside. Traditionally, I'm looking for 4 moves because it's like a Wyckoff range. You want to see the M shape jump and you want to see something that resembles that. We may have gotten it because of this weird move here. So potentially, like, we've already gotten 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it's possible that that's it, and it's just going to go. But usually it's not, I don't know, that's really compressed, right? It's just strange. I think the reason for that is the steepness of this other creek was like so radically steep. Like it just went really, really crazy around that marker. On Friday close into Monday open. It's hard to say. I don't know. We've talked about these bottoms a lot. You basically just want to see something that looks like a decent Wyckoff range, but it's usually very compressed on a spring-like bottom. So you're going to get the auto reaction, and then you're going to get a phase B top of some kind, and then you might come low for like a spring, and then you're going to see another big move back up. And this can happen in a way that on perhaps like the daily or something, you might just see a few bars. I mean, it might look like chop, but usually on like the 20 or excuse me, the 30-minute or 15-minute, you'll see these kind of swooping up and down patterns. The only thing you don't want is repeated up thrusts with heavy volume in the tops that continually sell down. That's really the only thing you're worried about, and you don't want to see it continue to try to make higher highs and fail. That usually is more of an indication of distribution. Right now, this looks pretty good, this bouncing. And I said that earlier. I said I thought this looked pretty good too. Each of these walk downs looks okay to me. So, yeah, all that volume that you see on this side, that was going into Friday, all of that would be like given back. So if those are short positions, then your operator, if this is bullish, they'll just cover those short positions on the way back up, and you'll just kind of eat it back up really quickly. Maybe it's a way to range it out, but typically that's not what we see. If this is the end of a spring action, again, maybe you get some of that chop to cross these last ones, but after that, then you just kind of go. It's a big deal. You know, there's another possibility here, which I didn't even really think about, and I don't want to go through every single thing under the sun, but you could have something like this on the top too, because sometimes you get like a last minute kind of cat ear that drops you low. This is kind of typical. You get like an acceleration where it almost becomes parabolic. And then after this one, you get a cat ear down and it does a bigger retracement, and then you go and it just advances. So this is your ascending accumulation potentially at work. It's just starting. So you would see like a series of up thrusts that gets you to each of these levels, and then you'd walk back down every day, basically, in this model. And then eventually you'd have a bigger one that jumps the creek, but you wouldn't advance right away. And this could be a little longer than I've drawn it. But then you would basically see it back up, some kind of like 50% retracement or something. It wouldn't lose the creeks at all. It would just back up. This avoids a gap fill in this scenario that I'm showing you, because after that, you should just go right up to like the 50-50 markers. I'm going to try something real quick. What was the low again? We just talked about it. It was 445. Is that low enough? And the high was like 596. Something like that. So the middle is at 515. Yeah, I don't know. That doesn't really look right to me, but okay. Man, I'd have to go back and look at my notes. trying to determine if that's low enough. I probably would have picked a different number for like a middle. Like maybe that 484 or something, which would drive this lower. But it is in the right spot. Because that 515 is right on the intersection of this one. So that wave would go up and then potentially pass higher. Maybe. It gives you the right layups. Just have to be a little longer. Maybe. I mean, if it's similar to what we were mapping out on IWM and MPW, this concept of like laying up until about July, what was it, 5th? I mean, it's possible. It could be a lot faster than that, but I guess it could go slower too. I mean, it just depends if you get stuck beneath them versus above them. I don't know. It's in the right spot though, so. We did the fib fan thing just like on MPW, and it's in the right spot. So this gives you a pretty adequate path back to the top. In terms of like sine waves, you know, jump, come down, 50%, move, back up. Hard to say. It's a little lower. It's more like right between these two. It's just an average. It's a way for averaging it. Yeah, so potentially this comes all the way up very rapidly to like 545. So this would, maybe it would be like an SOS locally or close to it. A little mini one, and then I think you probably come back down. Anyways, this is just one possibility. Check the middle, take off. Who knows? Could come way down. This is a very difficult one to kind of say for sure. AMC likes to do weird stuff, so I like to spend a lot of time until it doesn't. It's like crazy like that. All of a sudden it just doesn't take any time, doesn't do anything it's supposed to do. It just goes. Yeah, I suspect this little pocket is going to be used for accumulation if they're going to do it here, and or building out a larger spring. One of the same options as MPW, and then I think you're going to walk out. Could be fast, could be slow, but you're going to have to move across these middles one way or the other. I feel like this move might be the most telling. This one, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. The whole thing looks decent still. It doesn't look horrible. I'm more concerned about like some kind of hooking action at this point, like coming up and failing and then retracing and starting low. But everything that happened today was fine. Nothing bad to really say about it. GME is a little more frightening because of the repeated bounces on this creek. It's just like not committing to it, to the jump. It's making me more nervous. AMC at least jumped the local one. I mean, it hasn't even reached the outer one yet. So there's nothing really pressing. The GME is different. It's just not really committed to it. Not yet. Maybe tomorrow. All right. Well, that's all I got for you. Short stream because I only streamed the last hour and a half. I will not stream first thing in the morning tomorrow, but I will when I am finished with what I'm doing in the morning. So maybe I'll start around like 10 or 11 or something like that, closer to lunchtime. So I'll see you all then.